Just was a notorious food thief in the neighborhood, but he had one specific target: the Martins household. It wasn't because their house was easiest to sneak into. It was because Mrs. Martins's cooking had an aroma so intoxicating that anyone within a mile could feel their stomachs growl. People said her food could trigger ulcers in anyone who hadn't eaten for a few hours. Just always on the brink of hunger, couldn't resist. On one fateful day, Mrs. Martins, who had just given birth, was in a rush to meet her doctor. The plumber hadn't arrived to fix the broken water pump, leaving her with limited options to handle her newborn's mess. With no running water and no time, she scooped up her baby's feces into a disposable food plate with the intention of dropping it at a nearby farm as fertilizer. Meanwhile, Just, ever the opportunist, had been lurking around the house, waiting for the perfect moment to sneak in and steal some of Mrs. Martin's food. His stomach growled as he imagined the delicious jollof beans she must have prepared. When he spotted the disposable plate left unattended, he swooped in, grabbed it, and ran off without a second thought. Sitting in his hideout, he noticed the smell was a little off. Maybe it's a new recipe, he thought to himself. In his rush, he didn't bother looking too closely. Despite the suspicious taste, he devoured the contents of the plate. After all, he was in a hurry, just in case anyone noticed the missing food. 3 days later, Just found himself doubled over in pain, unable to stand upright. His stomach had become a battlefield. He ended up in the hospital, where the doctors could barely believe the source of his sickness when he finally admitted what he'd eaten. The medical bills cost him half his life savings, and he spent weeks recovering. From that day forward, Just swore off his life of petty thievery. Whenever he smelled food coming from the Martins' house, he'd feel a strange mix of nostalgia and nausea. Better to starve, he thought, than to gamble on a plate again.